back to 5 Acres Honey Farm. Today, this video, obviously by the name of it, we're not at home. We are on an Alaskan trip. Our first visit was to Kenai Fjords National Park, and I'll share a little bit about our trip there. We just did the Marmot Meadows hike today, which is part of the Harding Icefield Trail. And there's really not many trail options. Most of the park you need to ride by sea or by air. And we did a little bit of that one trail that I just mentioned on the Harding Icefield, and we didn't continue on because most of the rest of the trail is still under a lot of snow, and it still had great views of the glacier. And then yesterday we did a boat tour of the national park, and we saw some humpback whales, sea lions, puffins, dolphin, otters, you know, all of the stuff that you expect to see. What I still have not seen yet, and we passed a lot of signs for them, are moose. I really would love to see a moose. I've never seen one in my life, and hoping to see that. I wanted to share a few surprises we had. The hike that we did this morning on that Harding Icefield Trail, the part that we went up to at Marmot Meadows was supposed to be 1.5 miles, but based on the GPS tracker and Fitbit steps, it was more like 2 miles.
2.5.
It was more like 2.5 miles. So it was definitely a strenuous hike, and I read a lot. You know, everything I read about it was very accurate. It's pretty challenging, and just prepare yourself though, because it was a little bit longer than we expected.
2.5 is one way.
And 2.5, that's one way. So I took up a big chunk of the morning, and fortunately we had an awesome breakfast, which I'll share about at Le Barn Appetit, this kind of unassuming little crepe place right on the road that heads into that hiking area. The other surprises that we've had, or at least that I've had, is that I was really expecting not to sleep well, because right now sunset is about 11:45 p.m. local time, and sunrise is about 4:30 a.m. local time. So not much darkness at night, and I very much, you know, coming from the longest day of the year, you know, the summer solstice, and we flew here the next day. So having so much light there, you know, this is a lot more light, and I thought it was going to be harder to sleep, but I'm sleeping really well. And there were blackout curtains at the last hotel we were at. There was no air conditioning, so I was also expecting not to sleep well, because it's been fairly warm. When we landed in Anchorage, it was about 80 degrees, and then we stayed in Seward for the past few nights. And it's been, you know, it does get down in the evenings to like in the 40s, 50s, but it's been pretty warm during the day. And now we're heading to Denali, and it's 77 degrees. Not really what I was expecting in Alaska. Very, very warm. They are saying that it's a heat wave, that this isn't typical. The other surprise that we had, or at least Mike had, was that,
Stupid.
no, it's not.
Stupid.
But like Kenai Fjords, like, you know, I was expecting a lot of, you know, marine landscape, yeah, fjords and stuff, but it was actually like there's a much more mountainous than we were expecting, and then now, you know, it's actually pretty flat. Like Denali, there's a bit of the tundra there, so we were expecting that the first part of our trip was going to be much more like sea level kind of landscape, and then we were going to go to the mountains, but it actually kind of feels the opposite at this point. The other surprise that I had personally was, like, I was really like waiting and hoping to have like the best salmon of my life in Alaska, and the first meal that we had was horrible. It was like out of like a Walmart freezer case kind of salmon, like really dry, overcooked. There was really no flavor to it. And of course, everything's very expensive up here, and you would think like a local fish would be not as expensive, but it is. And then we did have lunch at Ray's on the Waterfront in Seward today, and I'll share about that. And that was great fish taco, the salmon tacos, really good, highly recommend it. But that was kind of like a strange thing to come here and then have like a disappointing salmon meal and then have a good one. So definitely read the reviews. I did read the reviews before we went to the other restaurant yesterday, which was called like Sea Salt, I think. It was right by the Sea Life Center, and the recent reviews were not promising, so I should have just listened to those. We have a plan to go to 50 national parks before we're 50, and that this was actually my 18th park and Mike's 17th park. We've both been to a few different ones on our own before, and so this trip we're doing 2 more parks here in Alaska, and then we have about 3 more national parks we're doing this year in other trips. When we first landed, we landed in Anchorage, and this is the drive down to Seward, and we thought it was going to be like this for a little bit, but the entire drive is stunning. We are on a 5-hour boat tour out of Seward, and one of our stops is at this glacier, which is an entire mile wide, which is pretty incredible. More potatoes. I harvested about 60 pounds of potatoes before we left on this trip.
That's why these islands are nicknamed the beehives.
Did you hear that? I had to capture this as a beekeeper, but these islands are called the beehives because of all of the birds that fly in and out and off the ledges, and they're just nesting everywhere.
Common ears up on the ledges, and if you are a bird, you might be able to find a thick-billed common ear up in here.
Lots of sea lions and their pups everywhere.
Again, that is the whole reason that they are up here in Alaska.
Although we've seen many more whale and gotten much closer than this is just a little footage of the spouts. It is the next day. We're still in Seward. We are at Le Barn Appetit, and they specialize in crepes and quite an interesting collection of odds and ends. So it's just really nice to sit here and enjoy the quirky ambiance. I got the black currant special, and there's a little bit of Nutella in here too. So I'm just looking forward to digging in and getting on the trail. I just picked some violets. Let's see if we'll eat some. And we made it to Marmot Meadows. This is the view. So this is the view of Exit Glacier, which we're gonna go on a separate hike for. Right down there. So today we're at Kenai Fjords National Park, and we just hiked up to Marmot Meadows to Exit Glacier. This trail keeps going to the Harding ice fields, but we're not going to keep going. We're going to go back down to a closer look at the glacier. The trail was a little longer than we thought, so we skipped the second trail and just went straight to lunch. We are at Ray's Waterfront, and I got salmon tacos. Now we are taking the drive. It's a 6-hour drive from Seward up to Denali, but we've got some beautiful mountains here along the coast to enjoy before we get closer to the next park. Creek next to the cabin for the night, our first night in Denali. The mosquitoes are really, really bad. This is our cabin here, but mosquitoes are terrible, so going inside. I read great reviews about this restaurant, Musaka, and we just got drinks and just relaxing after a long drive. I got cabbage leaves stuffed with some rice and beef and a little bit of pita. One of their desserts is Grandma's chocolate cake, and it's actually, I had a bite, it's not as chocolatey as I was expecting or wanting, but it's still really, really good. I still have not seen a moose, and I'm actually a little disappointed / underwhelmed by this park. I had really big visions for it, and There doesn't seem to be a tremendous amount of wildlife. It's very desolate, pretty quiet. You can only drive in 15 miles before taking a bus tour, and once we're in a better place, I'll share more about my thoughts on these bus tours, and I really feel like it was a bit of a scam. But regardless, it's a pretty drive, but there's not a lot going on, and this is like a really, really far away place to get to, and I was expecting some more life than what we're seeing. Of course, after I say there's not much life here, we see a porcupine walking on the side of the road, trying to film this while driving a little bit closer, so not the best footage, but there he is. In the winter, the only method of transportation in the park is by dog sled. So the dogs are kind of just resting and training in the summer, but I just stopped by to take a peek at all the pups here. They've got some dog houses and some kennels. If you've done any research about Denali, you've probably learned that a very small, see this little thing here? Very small percent of folks actually get to see Denali, and it's out today. We were supposed to be flying to Glacier Bay National Park. However, we need to end our trip early, so I will explain more shortly, but we are on the plane and we are heading home on the first of many flights. I tried to consolidate things. It takes like 3 flights to get up here, but I've got my books. I'm loving this Barbara Kingsolver collection of stories called Homeland. It's really great. To end our trip early, we are back home, and unfortunately, we haven't had a real vacation in almost 4 or 5 years. We've had a lot of family illness and death the past few years, and we were hoping this was going to be like our first real getaway, knock a few national parks off the list. Like I shared, we're trying to get to 50 national parks before we're 50. However, we did have a family illness and we needed to get home. Some things I just wanted to share about traveling to Alaska. We've shared some of our surprises and some disappointments and things. But I have to say, we learned when we were in Denali that we needed to get home early. So at that point, we had been flying out of Anchorage, and Anchorage is 4 hours from Denali. One of the surprises and a little bit of a stress factor was that to arrange and change our flights to get home early, it's not like we could just leave like that day or the next day. Like the way that the timing of the flights and the schedules to get, back to like mainland US and then get back to the East Coast, we weren't able to leave until 2 days later. So that made me feel really disconnected and very anxious and impatient. And so being that far away, that was really hard. Of course, we were expecting at different places we wouldn't have a very good signal. And fortunately, where we were staying in Denali, great service. So I was able to make the phone calls that I needed. We did lose out on, some of the things, and I'll share a little bit about the bus tour. But the other thing I wanted to say is that, I guess depending on the airline that you're flying, you might have a different experience. But with the airline that we flew, to call and change our flights, it was a 2-hour hold. So that just compounded the stress of fortunately there's certain phone services now, so you don't have to sit on hold, they'll just call you back. But then you need to make sure that 2 hours or within that 2-hour time frame that you're going to have service. So that's stuff that we were really fortunate that we were able to have good service, but I know not everybody might have that situation. So that was a little unfortunate. I had mentioned that in Denali, you can only drive in the first 15 miles on the road, and then beyond that, only designated bus tours are allowed. So we knew that in advance, and I had researched different bus tours, and from what I had read and from what I saw watching other YouTube videos, is that you need to get your bus ticket in advance or you're going to run the risk of getting there and there's no seats left. So a week before we flew out there, I wanted to keep an eye on the weather and stuff, because if I saw it was going to be like really bad storms, then I didn't want to sit on a bus for half a day or a full day. So the weather looked fairly good, and I took the gamble. And the way the bus tours are set up, you either need to pick a morning or an afternoon departure time. And so the way that it's set up on the site right now is that there's like a drop down and you can pick a 5 a.m. tour or a 1 p.m. tour. And like the 1 p.m. one is a range from like 1 p.m. to 7 p.m. So that interpretation to me is like, okay, so the tour is going to be somewhere between 1 and 7. And then the 5 a.m. one is like 5 a.m. to 1 or something like that. So being that we had gotten up really early to fly out to Alaska, we got up really early for our boat tour in Seward. I figured let's just not do another early morning day and let's do the 1 p.m. to 7 p.m. one. The way that the bus tour operates is they don't send you your actual departure time until 2 days before the tour. So 2 days before the tour, I went online to see, and our tour wasn't leaving until 4 o'clock, which means we wouldn't get back till about 10 o'clock at night. And then originally our plan was to fly out early the next morning, and with the 4-hour drive, like more or less the short version is that time doesn't work, and I would not have booked a tour starting at 4 o'clock. So through a crazy runaround of phone calls and being transferred and being disconnected, and again, like not having good service, so we had to stop somewhere and try to do all this administration while we had service, which cut down on our driving because, we needed to just stay and get it resolved. They do not transfer your tickets. So if you are buying tickets on these bus tours, you are totally out of luck. Like your money is gone at that point. They only offer doing a standby, but they only do standby the day of, and you need to like be there in person. And to get there so early in the morning, just for a risk of like, you may not even get a seat. That didn't really make sense to me. And then after all of that stress, shortly thereafter is when we learned that we needed to get home early, so we weren't even going to be around for that bus tour. But in general, we were going to skip it because it just wasn't going to fit into the schedule, and it's a few $100s gone. Personally, I did not want to do the bus tour. This was something that Mike wanted to do. Just this thought of sitting on a bus for 5 hours, and this is from what I saw in the videos, this is, a refurbished school bus, and the roads are not paved, and the route that we were going to do is going to be 43 miles one way. And I know there's to get into the park to see the wildlife and everything, but we saw some of the bus tours, we were, driving, behind them and in front of them and things. And it definitely did not look like anything I would want to do, because if you are seeing wildlife, then everybody on the bus is then cramming over to that side. And I feel like my personal space would be invaded in that sense. But those are things that like I didn't learn about really in the videos that I saw on YouTube. So that's what I just wanted to mention, is that was something that looked really uncomfortable, and that no one had really shared. One thing that I did learn from other videos and from the description of the tour, is that there are cameras on the bus, so that if there is wildlife spotted, they'll magnify that and then they display it on monitors on the bus. And again, this is my personal opinion, that just feels like you're on a bus watching YouTube. Like, part of what I love about going to national parks is actually like experiencing the park and seeing the wildlife like when you're there, like whether you're on a trail or from an observation deck or something like that, like just seeing it in the setting. So seeing it through a monitor just didn't seem attractive to me. So overall, I'm glad that the bus tour didn't work out, because I just have a feeling it would have been like a really, really big disappointment, and I just wouldn't have enjoyed the format and just all of that stuff. with all that said, we did not make it to Glacier Bay National Park. That was the last park on our trip, and we have a friend who's living in Juneau who we had planned to see. So we didn't get to do that. And we do not have plans on, redoing this next year or the year after. Like, this was a really big trip. We're trying to do smaller trips. And so we were, we kind of had a lot of planning went into this. So it's really disappointing it didn't work out. And our next national park we were going to go to, we also have to cancel that. Also due to family illness. So basically we're down 2 parks this year that we're not making it to, but we actually are down 3 because we were going to just stop at another one on our way to the next. But when those get rescheduled, I'll share, what they are. But at this point, the only one on schedule for the rest of the year is Mammoth Cave National Park, and we are planning to do that later in the year. Hopefully all of this kind of stuff that we have to deal with right now will have passed. I was hoping to share more kind of like beekeeping related and honey related things about Alaska. I do have a fireweed honey that I got up there, and it's fantastic. Yeah, this is the Alaskan fireweed honey, and it is so good. You can see I've already eaten almost the whole jar, but I'm adding this to my honey bar. And if you've missed an earlier video, I did a DIY kitchen renovation, and this is now going to sit on my honey bar. I just added it here. I've got some regional honeys, and then I've got some honey from Florida, and I'm just continuing to add to this as we travel. When we first landed in Alaska, we drove to downtown Anchorage to grab some lunch before the drive down to Seward, and one of the first things I saw in someone's backyard was a swarm trap, and I was like, this is so weird to go basically like halfway around the world and then like to see like such a, there's definitely a beekeeping community out there too. I hope that I'll have some more to share next time, and I'll have some hive updates to share soon too. And thank you for watching, and please like, subscribe, and I'll share more.